So welcome to episode 39 of My Doll's House Diary, and today we're going to be continuing where we left off yesterday with our doors and the flooring. So let's get started. So the flooring sheets are now obviously completely dry. This one will need a gentle sand, but this one I really love how it's dried. That colour's really nice. So I'm going to start with the door, and then later on I'll do those little nail holes and we'll get these glued into place. And I'll need to have these glued into place before I can do the door surrounds anyway. Okay, so I want to begin by drilling the holes in the top and bottom door frames, and those are the pieces that I made up of two strips, so my 3 and 6mm strip to make one 9mm strip. And I've drilled my holes into the 3mm strip so that when the door is then in place it will cover that join in the two pieces there, and it won't really be noticeable anyway, so I could still have the doors open and that's not sort of going to jump out at you, but at least when the doors are closed that will be completely covered. And I've done the pencil mark for the hole 2mm in and 2mm back, and that's because my door will be 4.5mm thick, so that will sit centrally in the door there. So I've got a 0.8mm bit here in my drill. Just going to drill down. And you just want to use your smallest bit or something that's about the thickness of a dressmaking pin. So I'm now ready to glue my frame together. And when you're doing that, just make sure that your drilled holes are on the same edge at the top and bottom of your frame. I'm using the lines on my cutting mat to make sure that I'm keeping it square. So I'm now going to leave that to dry, and then when it's dry I can go and try it in place and then make a start on the doors. So my frame is now completely dry, and I left that drying over lunch. So now I want to go and try that into place. And that is a really nice fit. I've got a bit of gapping along the top there, but I'm not worried about that because when I put the surrounds on, they'll come down to the bottom of this top part of the frame. So that will all be covered with those frames, as I did with these doors here. So this part comes down to the bottom of that frame strip. So any gapping is completely covered. And that's what we'll be doing here. And then I also said in these videos, if I sort of push the door shut, the door is flush with this part of the house, so the hallway, so all of the doors will be flush with the hallways, and then the dip will be on the inside of the room. So because the strip is 9mm and the door is 4.5, you're always going to have a bit of an overhang, and you want to make sure that you keep that uniform and that is always on the same side. So it doesn't matter if you have it in the room or facing into the centre of the house, but just be consistent with that. So my doors are all going to be flush in the hallway rooms. So there again in the study, the overhang is on the inside of the room, and then the door is flat or flush in the landing part. So that's how I'll keep it throughout, and the same here. So the holes that I made are on this side, so that my doors again will be flat along here. Okay, so I know now that my frame is a nice fit, so I can carry on with the construction of the doors. So once you know that your frame is a perfect fit, trim your door panels if you need to, and I just had to trim a little bit off of each of mine, and I've just left less than 0.5mm gap at the top and bottom, just so that doors will open and close smoothly. And then I've cut them widthwise so they just fit nicely in there. You don't want to leave too much gap in across the width, because when we then round one long edge, which will be the hinged edge, we'll take off just enough that again that will allow enough for them to open and close smoothly that way as well. So now we can start building them up with the panelling. So I've just finished gluing the pieces to the first door, and I haven't gone into too much detail, as like I say, all of that is included in that door tutorial that I've shared before, and I'll link to that again at the end of this one as well. But just a few tips. I would say sand the surface of all of your pieces before you begin putting it all together. Keep using your spare strip to make sure that you're keeping the pieces flush at the top and bottom, otherwise your door isn't going to fit back into your frame and you'll have to do some sort of vigorous sanding. And then the last thing is just make sure that you clamp everything together as the glue dries, because as it starts to dry, all of the pieces will start to try and lift away from the door. And try and get a clamp onto each sort of join and each corner of those panels. Overlap that onto that one as well. Oops, missing a tip of that one. And the pencil marks on there are the measurement for my handle, which I'm having at the same height on all of the doors. So I just went out and double checked that. I know it's 81mm, but I just wanted to double check in case I'd sort of adjusted the height and hadn't made a note of it in my book. Always a good idea to do that. Oops, missing a tip on that one as well. I think I need some new clamps. And final one there. So it looks a bit overkill. Let me just zoom out a little bit. But it's a really good idea to attach as many clamps as you can so that those pieces will dry flat. So I'm now going to do the other door, and then when this first one has dried, I'll turn it over and attach the pieces to that side. Okay, so that's the first side of the second door panelled as well, and that one has now completely dried. Now, time has actually got away from me again. It's now gone 5, and we had a bit of a power cut earlier and it only lasted an hour, but I couldn't record because I had to have the blind down because the sun was so bright in here, and I couldn't have the light on, so it was too dark to record. I couldn't do any editing, and then this afternoon I had to edit another video which I have a deadline for, so it's been sort of one of those days. So I'm going to continue recording this part of the Doll's House Diary tomorrow, but I will edit today and tomorrow into one video, but it will still run on from the video that I shared yesterday, which you probably don't really need to know because I haven't finished editing the first part yet, so for you it will still be the next day, if you know what I mean. I don't really know what I'm saying now, I'm so tired as well. It's been a lovely hot day though, and we've had all of the windows and the back door open, which has been really nice. And we sat outside and had our lunch as well, which was a nice treat. So anyway, I'll carry on with these doors tomorrow and we'll get that flooring in, and then I can close this video off. So the first sides are now completely dry, left those drying overnight. So I'm now just going to turn them over and do the same thing again on the other side. So let me get myself some glue. When you're making adjustments like that, always just cut off a tiny bit at a time and then try again, and then cut off more if you need to. It's really annoying if you cut off too much and then you've left like quite a large gap. So I've now got a lovely perfect fit there. It's quite satisfying where you hear the piece just sort of click into place. So that's both doors now done. I'm going to leave those to dry, and whilst they're drying I'm going to make a start on the nail holes in the flooring sheets. And to do that I'm going to use my scribe, and I'm sure you've all seen me do this before, and it's just one of those really nice little details. And I basically just do a little hole in each corner of each strip. Okay, so that's that one done. So I'm now going to move on to the dining room flooring. But as I said, this one is going to need a bit of a sand. So I'm just going to use a piece of 500 grade to go over the surface of this piece. And I've got one of my 500 grade discs here on a block to make that job a bit easier. And I'm sorry about the weird light, but I've opened the blind because the sunshine is just so nice and warm. It's really nice to work in. Once you've sanded, use a soft brush to remove the dust from between the strips. And I'm now ready to add the nail holes. So once all the mouldings have dried into place, sand the doors on all edges. So go along the sandpaper on each edge like that, just in the one direction, if you don't want to round off the corners. And then what you can do is actually hold it face down onto the sandpaper and go around in small circular motions. And that will just smooth off all the moulding, so make sure that everything's flush. But also if you've got any little marks from your clamps, that will get rid of those as well. So the next thing to do is to round off one long edge of each door and on both sides of the door. So hold it at a 45-degree angle, and as you sweep it towards you, bring it into an upright position. And if you struggle with your sandpaper, if it keeps moving, you can just attach that to your work surface with a line of masking tape and see how that's just starting to round off. I'm going to do a little bit more, and by doing this it just helps the door to open and close more smoothly. If you've just got those sharp edges, it tends to just get stuck in the frame. Keep going until you've got a nice rounded edge, and I'm showing you from the top there, and you can see how that's rounded off. I've done both doors now, and what I want to do is drill the holes for the pin hinges. So to start with, I'm just going to use a pin and go into each of the holes that we drilled in that bottom support, and then just make a little mark at the bottom of the door. So I'm not trying to push the pin all the way in, I'm just making that mark where I can then drill the hole. And I explain all of this in that door tutorial. And the other end as well, which is the top of the door, and I know that because my longer panel is at the top. You can check at this stage that the doors do actually open nicely. I'm happy with that. Remove the pins. Oops. And there, you've got your little mark of where to drill your hole. So I'll go and do that now. So I've drilled the holes, and you want to make sure you go down by about 6mm or 1/4 of an inch, and you can check that by putting the pin in, putting your nail at the top and then pulling that out. And that's a bit more than 6mm there, so that's fine. Now I'm not going to fit these yet because I like to paint the doors and the frame separately. That way you can get along the edges of the doors and all the way around the inside of the frame. So you're not going to have any natural wood showing once you've done. And I'm going to use again the natural calico for these, which I'm going to be using for the doors throughout. So I've done 2 coats of paint on each of those pieces, and I gave them a gentle sand after the first coat had dried. So once this coat has dried, I'll give them another sand, and then we'll be ready to fit the door into the doll's house. So my doors are now complete, and I've just given the second coat of paint a gentle sand, and I now want to fit them into the frame. So I've put some new pins in because the old ones were covered in paint, and I'm now going to trim them. I'm going to go a little bit longer than usual because I've got a 3mm frame to get through, and I want them to reach the bottom of the frame. Trim them to about 4 or 5mm, and I'm just doing that by eye. I'm going to take the pin out of the bottom of the door there and just pop that top one into place. And then get the door level, sitting where it should sit. And then you can pop that pin back in at the bottom. And this is the tricky bit, actually finding the hole in the bottom of the door. But we know they're in the right place, so you just need to persevere with it. And if it's not going in, you might just need to sort of jiggle the door about a bit, make sure that it's flush with the front of the frame. So as I push the door in then, the top of my frame popped open, and that's where the paint has got sort of inside the join. So I'm just going to put a bit of masking tape on there. The door is in place, but I'm just going to tape it together whilst I'm working on the other door. Like that. While that frame dries back into place. And then get the other one into place. So when you've put the paint on, you might find that the doors are a little bit tighter and you may have to do a little bit of sanding. So mine feel quite tight in the middle now, but I prefer that than having too much gap in. So as long as they open and close, I'm happy with that, and they look really nice in the frame as well. So I'm now going to attach the door handles. I turn it like that, and just using my smaller rule, I'm just going to make the pencil mark 81mm up from the bottom there, and that's the position of all of the handles in the doll's house. I just actually want to go and check on the ones that are already fitted in the doll's house how far in I came with them, because I haven't made note of that. I know that the actual handle is level with that 81. Maybe I just put them centrally, but let me go and check. One moment. Yes, it is just central on that strip down there, so that's what I'll do here. And then I can erase those pencil marks once I've fitted it. So a bit of glue on the back, just using my Gorilla Wood glue again. Works really well with these brass handles. So have a look from the front, make sure you're happy, and then you can attach the handles on the other side. And again, I use this first one to line up the one on the back of the door. So the first thing to actually do is dry fit your door. So I haven't applied any glue to this yet, but you just want to make sure that you've got a nice fit, and that after having applied the paint it hasn't sort of swollen a little bit, otherwise you won't be able to get it back in. So I did have to do a little bit of sanding around the frame just to get that to fit in there, and that really is a tight fit. Now I was toying with the idea of not applying glue, and then when I do the surrounds that will sort of hold it in place, but I will put a little bit of glue just on sort of each side frame, and I'll take it back into my craft room to do that. So I'm just going to put a little bit at each side. I just want to push that in really carefully, because as I say, it is a really tight fit. So push it in and make sure your frame is obviously flush with your wall. It needs to go in a little bit there. Yeah, let me check from the other side as well. So even having applied that glue, it's made the frame even tighter in there. So my doors now are a little bit tight. But what I'll do is once that glue's dried, I can just take a little bit off of one of them. So that they sort of sit nicely together in there. But otherwise, I'm really pleased with how they look. Let's have a look from around the other side as well. Get a bit of light on the subject. Yeah, really pleased with that. I may need to do a little bit of fill-in along the front edge there. Okay, so for the final job today, I now want to get the flooring glued into place in both the dining room and the living room. Okay, so I've taken the top of the glue off here, just so I can get more glue onto the floor more quickly. And just brush it around before it dries or starts to dry. So I prefer to apply the glue directly to the floor, but it doesn't really matter whether you do it onto the floor of the doll's house or, you know, onto the back of the flooring sheet. I don't think it makes much difference really. But do make sure you get it right sort of along the edges. And I know which is my front edge because it's the neater edge. So I've got a few sort of little cut off bits at the end, which will be covered with the skirting board anyway, but it's nice to have a really nice neat front edge at the front of your doll's house, so the visible edge. So give that a good press into place. And then I'm just going to grab some kitchen towel. I just want to lay that in there just to protect the floor. I'm then going to place a ceramic tile into each corner, and then when I put my books in to weigh it down, that disperses the weight more evenly over the floor. So I'm getting them right along this front edge as well. And then I've got 4 tiles left for the room below, which works out nicely. So I'll just go and grab some heavy books. I'm just going to tuck those in the sides there. And then I'm just going to get a couple of tins to stand in that front bit. Just along that front edge there. Like that. And I can then leave that to dry overnight. Now let's move down to the dining room. Okay, so that's both floors drying into place. And I'll leave those weights there overnight just to make sure that the glue has a chance to completely dry. Okay, so that's it for today. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode. Now in the next episode I want to finish off fitting out the entrance hall, so get the skirting and coving into place, make a new stringer to go up along the stairs and actually fit that stair cupboard into place. So until then, take care. Bye.